In 1974, deep in the rural heart of China's Shaanxi province, a group of farmers stumbled upon something that would rewrite history. As their shovels struck the hard earth, hoping to find water for their fields, they uncovered not a well, but the edge of a buried empire. Beneath their feet lay fragments of a clay soldier, lifelike and eerily preserved, the first glimpse of what we now know as the Terra Cotta Army. This accidental discovery would unveil one of the greatest archaeological marvels of all time, an entire underground battalion, thousands strong, standing in silent vigil for over 2,000 years. But here's the thing, this army wasn't just guarding the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. It was guarding secrets, and even today, half a century after its unearthing, those secrets remain stubbornly unsolved. Picture this, row upon row of meticulously crafted warriors, each with unique facial features, their expressions frozen in time. Some clutch weapons, others kneel as if ready for battle, their painted armor once vibrant but now faded by centuries. Yet for every answer these statues provide about ancient craftsmanship, military organization, or imperial power, they raise a dozen more questions. Why were they built with such astonishing detail, only to be buried and forgotten? How did artisans achieve such precision over 2 millennia ago? And most haunting of all, what other wonders lie hidden in the untouched chambers of Qin Shi Huang's tomb, a place so dangerous that even modern archaeologists hesitate to breach its depths? That's exactly what we're exploring today, 25 mysteries surrounding the Terra Cotta Army that continue to baffle experts and ignite imaginations. From the eerie absence of historical records describing its creation to the rumored rivers of liquid mercury flowing beneath the emperor's resting place, these puzzles aren't just academic, they're gateways to understanding an ancient world that defies logic. Were these soldiers meant to protect the emperor in the afterlife, or were they part of a darker, more elaborate ritual? What happened to the craftsmen who built them, and why were their tools found hastily discarded? Stick with us as we peel back the layers of one of history's most enigmatic discoveries, piece by tantalizing piece. Because the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes. The Terra Cotta Army isn't just a relic of the past. It's a riddle waiting to be solved. The sheer scale of the Terra Cotta Army forces us to confront a haunting question. Why would an emperor invest such staggering resources into an army meant never to be seen? Historians have long debated whether these silent soldiers were purely guardians of the afterlife, or if Qin Shi Huang had a far more calculating vision. Traditional explanations point to ancient Chinese beliefs, where emperors prepared lavish tombs filled with treasures, servants, and even sacrificed concubines to serve them in death. But this army feels different. 8,000 clay soldiers, 600 horses, and hundreds of chariots weren't just symbolic offerings. They were a meticulously organized military force, arranged in precise battle formations as if ready for war beyond the grave. Yet there's a glaring oddity. No historical texts from the Qin dynasty even mention the army's creation. Not a single scroll, court record, or poet's verse hints at the decades of labor required to build it. For an emperor obsessed with documenting his achievements, standardizing weights, building the Great Wall, unifying China's written language, this silence is deafening. Some scholars argue the secrecy was intentional. Qin Shi Huang's reign was marked by paranoia. He survived multiple assassination attempts and purged dissenting scholars. Could the army have been a hidden show of strength, a warning to rebellious nobles that even in death, his power was absolute? Then there's the political theater angle. The Qin dynasty was young, its hold on power fragile. A project of this magnitude would have employed thousands of laborers conscripted from conquered territories. Crafting an eternal army might have been a display of control, proof that the emperor could command both the living and the cosmic order. But perhaps most intriguing is the theory that the Terra Cotta Army was never meant to be buried at all. Some fragments show traces of bright pigment, suggesting the figures were originally displayed above ground, dazzling visitors with their lifelike detail before being hastily interred after the emperor's sudden death. The truth may lie in the tomb itself. Ancient texts describe Qin Shi Huang's burial complex as a microcosm of his empire, complete with flowing mercury rivers representing China's great waterways. If the Terra Cotta Army was just the outermost layer, what does that say about the treasures or terrors hidden deeper within? Every theory circles back to the same chilling possibility. This wasn't just a funeral artifact. It was a message carved in clay from an emperor who believed his rule would transcend mortality, and 2,000 years later we're still deciphering it. One of the most tantalizing mysteries of the Terra Cotta Army isn't about the soldiers themselves, it's about what lies beyond them. Just beyond the excavated pits, hidden beneath a towering earthen mound, sits the heart of this archaeological enigma, Qin Shi Huang's untouched tomb. Despite 50 years of research and cutting-edge technology, archaeologists have never breached its inner chambers. The reason? Ancient texts warn of deadly traps, rivers of liquid mercury, and curses waiting for anyone who disturbs the emperor's eternal rest. Historical records from the Han Dynasty describe the tomb as a sprawling underground palace, its ceilings studded with pearls to mimic the night sky, its floors carved with maps of the empire and rivers of mercury flowing mechanically, an imitation of China's mighty Yellow River. Modern tests confirm alarmingly high mercury levels in the soil around the mound, lending eerie credibility to these 2,000-year-old accounts. But the real deterrent isn't just poison, it's the fear of irreparable damage. The tomb's potential treasures, silk texts, lacquerware, perhaps even the emperor's sarcophagus, could disintegrate upon exposure to air. The ethical dilemma is equally paralyzing. Do we risk destroying this time capsule for knowledge or preserve it as a sacred site? Some argue that technology will eventually allow non-invasive exploration, like advanced ground-penetrating radar or robotic probes. Others counter that the tomb's very inaccessibility is part of its power, a reminder that some secrets are meant to stay buried. And then there's the chilling legend of the tomb's final craftsmen. According to ancient historian Sima Qian, as the emperor's burial was completed, workers were sealed inside to prevent them from revealing its secrets. If true, the tomb may hold not just treasures, but human remains, a dark layer to an already unsettling puzzle. Until science or courage catches up to curiosity, Qin Shi Huang's central tomb remains history's most tantalizing locked door. What waits inside? For now, only the Terra Cotta Army knows. Standing before the ranks of the Terra Cotta Army, one detail stops you cold: no two faces are alike. Each of the 8,000 warriors wears a unique expression, from the furrowed brow of a seasoned general to the youthful round cheeks of a fresh recruit. Archaeologists have catalogued dozens of distinct face molds, combined and customized with hand-sculpted details, clay mustaches added here, wrinkles carved there, even subtle variations in ear shapes. This isn't mass production, it's a staggering artistic endeavor that raises an irresistible question. Were these soldiers portraits of real people? The precision is unsettling. Some figures have high cheekbones and narrow eyes, characteristic of China's northwest regions, while others feature broader faces linked to ethnic groups from the eastern plains. This diversity mirrors the Qin dynasty's real army, a melting pot of conscripts from conquered territories. But here's the twist: creating individualized faces would have required live models or meticulous records of actual soldiers, a logistical nightmare in an era before photography. Unless the artisans worked from memory, sculpting comrades they'd fought alongside. Alternative theories suggest the faces represent archetypes rather than individuals. Ancient Chinese texts describe physiognomy, the belief that facial features revealed destiny. A warrior with a strong jaw might symbolize courage, a delicate nose could denote intelligence. By crafting a spectrum of faces, the emperor's artisans may have been assembling an ideal, supernatural army, each expression embodying a different martial virtue. Yet the most haunting possibility lies in the clay itself. Recent 3D mapping reveals that certain face molds repeat but are altered just enough to feel unique, like variations on a theme. This hints at a chilling middle ground. Perhaps the soldiers aren't portraits but composites. Artisans might have blended features of fallen heroes, distilling the essence of an army into eternal symbols. Whatever the truth, one thing's certain: Qin Shi Huang didn't just want an army in the afterlife. He wanted them to remember. The durability of the Terra Cotta warriors defies logic. After 2,000 years buried in damp soil, these clay soldiers emerged with details so sharp, you can still see the individual laces on their armor and the strands of their braided hair. Yet when modern scientists try to recreate the same terracotta material using traditional methods, their replicas crumble or crack within decades. The secret lies in the clay itself, a recipe so advanced for its time that even today's technology can't fully crack it. Tests reveal the original clay contains a precise blend of local earth, quartz sand, and a binding agent that's still unidentified. But here's what's truly baffling: the firing process. Each warrior was baked at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, yet the clay remained sturdy without warping or brittleness. Modern kilns struggle to achieve this balance: too hot and the figure shatters, too cool and it lacks strength. Some researchers speculate the Qin dynasty artisans used a lost technique, possibly layering different clay mixtures or controlling the kiln's humidity in ways we've yet to rediscover. Then there's the paint. When first unearthed, many warriors bore vibrant pigments: deep purples, fiery reds, and lapis blues made from rare minerals like malachite and cinnabar. But within minutes of exposure to air, the colors flaked away, leaving behind the familiar terracotta hue we see today. Scientists analyzing pigment fragments hit another wall: the binding medium. Unlike egg-based tempera or oil paints used later in history, the Qin dynasty's adhesive was something else entirely: a plant or animal-derived glue that bonded the paint to clay so firmly it survived centuries underground but couldn't endure modern oxygen. The most compelling theory: artisans may have treated the clay with organic sealants, perhaps lacquer or rice paste, before firing, creating a chemical reaction that strengthened the material. Ancient Chinese metallurgists were already mastering bronze alloys. Could they have applied similar experimentation to ceramics? Until we uncover a manual or workshop ruin detailing these methods, the Terra Cotta Army's resilience remains a testament to ingenuity lost to time. And that raises a humbling thought: if we can't replicate their clay, what other ancient technologies have vanished without a trace? Walking among the Terra Cotta warriors today, you'd never guess they were once a riot of color. The muted terracotta figures we see now are ghosts of their former selves, stripped of the dazzling pigments that once made them appear alive. When archaeologists first uncovered these soldiers, many still bore traces of vivid paint: rich blues made from crushed gemstones, fiery vermilion from cinnabar, deep purples from rare minerals traded along the Silk Road. But within moments of exposure to air, the colors curled and flaked away, leaving behind heartbreaking streaks of pigment clinging to the clay like faded memories. The science behind this rapid deterioration reveals just how advanced Qin dynasty artisans were. They didn't just slap paint onto dry clay, they engineered a complex layering system. First, a lacquer base made from tree sap was applied, a technique normally reserved for luxury items like ceremonial vessels. This sticky undercoat helped the pigments adhere, but it also created a fatal vulnerability. Over centuries underground, the lacquer absorbed moisture, forming a microscopic gap between paint and clay. When fresh air hit, that trapped moisture evaporated, causing the entire layer to shrink and peel off in sheets. Modern conservators face an impossible dilemma. To preserve any remaining pigment, they must act within seconds of uncovering a fragment. Some have experimented with instant adhesives or humidity-controlled excavation tents, but the results are patchy at best. In 2020, a breakthrough emerged, a synthetic compound that temporarily stabilizes the paint long enough to document its original placement. Yet even this is a far cry from restoring the army's true spectacle. Imagine standing before ranks of soldiers in full battle regalia, turquoise armor plates, scarlet sashes knotted at the waist, jet-black hair tied with indigo ribbons. The effect wouldn't just be artistic, it would rewrite our understanding of ancient Chinese military uniforms, which were previously known only from flaking tomb murals. The bigger mystery: why such extravagance for an army meant to remain hidden? Some scholars argue the colors weren't merely decorative, they carried cosmic significance. Azure represented the east and the rising sun, while crimson symbolized the emperor's divine mandate. By painting his underground forces, Qin Shi Huang may have been aligning them with celestial forces, transforming clay into a supernatural garrison. Others point to psychological warfare. If looters ever breached the tomb, the sudden blaze of color would have been terrifying, a visual shout that this was no ordinary burial site. Perhaps the most poignant detail lies in the pigments themselves. Analysis reveals some colors, like Han purple, were so expensive to produce that their use disappeared for centuries after the Qin dynasty's collapse. This wasn't just an army painted for eternity. It was a display of wealth so reckless it bankrupted an empire's palate. Today, digital reconstructions offer glimpses of what we've lost, but the true hues remain as elusive as the emperor's secrets. Every fleck of surviving paint is a whisper from the past, telling us these warriors weren't meant to be earth-toned ghosts. They were designed to awe then and now. While the Terra Cotta Army's main pits steal the spotlight, surrounding the site lies a network of lesser-known burial chambers, each filled with artifacts so bizarre they rewrite everything we thought we knew about Qin Shi Huang's afterlife. Just a few hundred meters from the warriors, archaeologists uncovered Pit K9907, a chamber not of soldiers but of life-sized terracotta acrobats frozen mid-performance. Some balance on one hand, their backs arched impossibly, others kneel as if catching an unseen object. These aren't military figures, they're entertainers. Their fluid poses a stark contrast to the rigid soldiers nearby. Then there's Pit K9906, brimming with bureaucrats. Unlike the warriors' fierce expressions, these figures clasp their hands politely, their faces radiating calm authority. They sit cross-legged, some with wooden tablets that once held administrative records now long rotted away. The message is clear: the emperor didn't just need an army in death, he needed an entire government. Tax collectors, scribes, even musicians were immortalized in clay, suggesting Qin Shi Huang expected to rule a fully functioning empire beyond the grave. But the most enigmatic pit might be K9908, where terracotta birds stand beside real animal skeletons. Cranes with outstretched wings, ducks mid-waddle, even bears and big cats. Unlike the stylized creatures in later Chinese art, these animals are startlingly realistic, their feathers and fur etched in meticulous detail. Were they meant as hunting companions, spiritual guides, or something darker? Ancient texts mention ritual sacrifices, but these creatures weren't slaughtered. They were carefully preserved, hinting at a belief that even animals had roles in the afterlife. Why are these pits so often ignored? Partly logistics. The main army was discovered first, becoming the face of the site, but there's also a cultural bias at play. Warriors fit our image of ancient power, acrobats and clerks challenge it, yet their presence reveals a profound truth. Qin Shi Huang's vision of eternity wasn't just conquest. It was continuity. Every aspect of his earthly rule, military, entertainment, administration, was painstakingly recreated, as if death were merely a change of address. The real mystery isn't why these pits exist, It's why we've taken so long to listen to their stories. Among the 8,000 Terra Cotta warriors standing in battle formation, there's a glaring absence the weapons they once held. While a few bronze swords, spears, and crossbow triggers have been recovered, the vast majority of arms are missing, leaving empty hands curled around phantom hilts. This isn't just a case of decay over time. These weapons vanished under circumstances as deliberate as they are mysterious, and the clues left behind tell a story of rebellion, ingenuity, and a technology far ahead of its era. One prevailing theory points to Xiang Yu, the rebel leader who overthrew the Qin dynasty just a few years after the emperor's death. Ancient texts describe his army looting the tomb complex, burning structures, and most critically plundering its weapons to fuel his uprising. Bronze was the currency of war, and stripping the Terra Cotta Army of their swords and arrowheads would have provided Xiang Yu's forces with invaluable material. Excavations support this. Some pits show clear signs of arson, with charred wooden beams and shattered figures, as if a violent struggle took place right in the emperor's necropolis. But here's the twist: not all weapons were taken. The few surviving examples defy expectations. Take the bronze swords. Despite being buried for over 2 millennia, they emerged untarnished, their edges still sharp enough to split paper. Metallurgists discovered why: a thin layer of chromium oxide coating the blades, an anti-corrosion technique not commonly used again until the 20th century. Even more astonishing, the alloy itself. These weren't crude castings, they were forged with precise ratios of copper, tin, and trace elements, creating a metal both flexible and deadly. One sword, bent during excavation, actually sprang back to its original shape, a testament to the Qin dynasty's mastery of tempering. Then there's the crossbow puzzle. Thousands of Terra Cotta archers stand with arms raised, yet only a handful of bronze triggers have been found. These mechanisms are engineering marvels, interlocking parts so standardized they could be swapped between crossbows like modern gun components. But if looters stole them, why leave any behind? Some archaeologists propose a darker explanation. The weapons might have been ritually killed, broken or buried separately to neutralize their power in the afterlife. Ancient Chinese tombs often contain deliberately damaged objects, smashed jade, cracked pottery, to release their spiritual essence. Could the missing weapons be part of a funerary ritual we've yet to fully understand? The most haunting possibility involves the warriors themselves. Recent scans reveal hollow cavities in some figures' hands, suggesting they once held wooden weapons, spears, halberds, or staffs that rotted away. But why mix materials? Practicality may hold the answer. Bronze was expensive, wood was plentiful. By arming most soldiers with wooden replicas and reserving metal for elite units, the emperor could cut costs without sacrificing symbolism. Or perhaps it was a clever deception, a way to trick tomb raiders into thinking the army was defenseless, while the real weapons lay hidden elsewhere. Whatever the truth, the missing arms force us to rethink the Terra Cotta Army's purpose. These weren't static monuments, they were a functioning arsenal designed for a war beyond death. And the surviving bronze swords, gleaming as if forged yesterday, whisper a chilling message. Even in fragments, Qin Shi Huang's power remains sharp enough to draw blood. The arrangement of the Terra Cotta Army's pits isn't just random, it's a deliberate mirror of Qin Shi Huang's empire, frozen in clay and earth. Each of the 4 main pits aligns with military strategy and cosmic symbolism, positioned in a way that suggests the emperor's tomb wasn't just a burial site, but a reflection of his living kingdom. Pit 1, the largest, holds the infantry vanguard, facing east, the direction from which Qin's enemies once threatened. Pit 2 flanks it with cavalry and chariots, while Pit 3, smaller and marked by elite officers, represents the command center. But the most telling detail lies in Pit 4, an eerily empty space. Archaeologists believe this was left unfinished, perhaps abandoned when the dynasty collapsed, or was it intentionally vacant, a silent nod to the emperor's belief in expansion even in death. Now zoom out. The entire complex mirrors the layout of Xianyang, Qin's capital, with pits arranged like districts in a city. The warrior formations replicate actual battle tactics described in ancient military texts, down to the spacing between rows. Yet there's another layer, Feng Shui. The site nestles between Mount Lai and the Wai River, a configuration long considered auspicious, mountains symbolizing stability at the back, water representing prosperity in front. Even the soil tells a story. Core samples reveal the pits were dug into a layer of packed earth, not natural ground, suggesting the land itself was sculpted to meet precise cosmological standards. But here's where it gets fascinating. Some scholars argue the alignment goes beyond metaphor. The main pits form a rough north-south axis, matching the Polaris constellation's position in ancient star maps. Qin Shi Huang obsessed over immortality. Could this layout have been an attempt to tether his empire to the heavens? Others point to the absence of a southern pit, theorizing it was meant to symbolize the emperor's unconquered lands, a challenge to his spirit to keep expanding in the afterlife. Then there's the enigma of the tomb mound itself. Unlike earlier pyramid-style burials, this one echoes the shape of a bell, a design some link to ancient harmonic principles. Its position relative to the army pits creates a perfect sightline to the sunrise during the winter solstice, a date tied to renewal in Chinese cosmology. Every choice, from the spacing of chariots to the angle of a general's gaze, feels calculated. Whether it's military precision, celestial mimicry, or something deeper, one truth remains: this wasn't just an army buried in the ground. It was a kingdom poised forever at the moment of its greatest power. For a project as massive and meticulously executed as the Terra Cotta Army, the silence from historical records is deafening. Sima Qian, the grand historian of the Han Dynasty, left behind the most detailed accounts of Qin Shi Huang's reign, yet his writings devote just a handful of cryptic lines to the army's creation. He describes the tomb's grandeur, the mercury rivers, even the fate of the workers sealed inside, but the 8,000 clay soldiers barely warrant a footnote. This omission isn't just odd, it's suspicious. Why would such a staggering feat of labor and artistry go virtually unrecorded in its own time? One theory is secrecy. Qin Shi Huang ruled through fear, purging scholars and burning books that challenged his authority. If the Terra Cotta Army was meant to be a hidden display of power, a safeguard against rebellion in the afterlife, its construction might have been classified. Imagine conscripted laborers sworn to silence, artisans working in isolated compounds, and scribes forbidden to document the project. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a covert operation. Even the materials tell a story. The clay was sourced locally, but the pigments lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cinnabar from distant mines hint at supply chains deliberately obscured to prevent leaks. But there's a darker possibility: purposeful erasure. When the Qin dynasty fell, rebels led by Xiang Yu razed palaces and libraries in an act of cultural vengeance. Scrolls that mention the emperor's extravagances, like an army of claymen, would have been prime targets. The Han dynasty, eager to distance itself from Qin's tyranny, might have suppressed records to avoid glorifying their predecessor. Think of it as ancient propaganda erasing the past to control the future. Yet Sima Qian's brief mention raises another question. He writes that the emperor ordered the craftsmen to set up crossbows and arrows in the tomb to shoot intruders. Was this a veiled reference to the Terra Cotta Army's weaponry? Some scholars believe his account was edited over time, its original details lost or censored. Others argue the army's existence was so commonplace it didn't merit elaboration. Like not describing every brick in a palace, the truth may lie in the fragments we'll never find. Qin dynasty records were kept on bamboo slips, fragile and easily destroyed. A single fire, a damp storage room, or a political purge could have erased centuries of documentation. What remains is a haunting gap in history, one that forces us to rely on clay soldiers to speak for the silence of scribes. And perhaps that was the point all along, to let the army itself, not words on a page, be the emperor's final testament. Qin Shi Huang didn't just build an army to guard his tomb. He built a psychological fortress. The sheer scale of the Terra Cotta Army reveals more than imperial extravagance. It exposes the deep-seated fears of a ruler who survived multiple assassination attempts and trusted no one, not even in death. Historical accounts paint a portrait of a man increasingly consumed by paranoia, traveling in secret, sleeping in different rooms each night, and executing anyone who dared question his authority. But his funerary choices betray something even darker, a terror so profound he couldn't imagine an afterlife without an army at his back. Consider the numbers. 8,000 soldiers, each positioned to defend his tomb from every cardinal direction. This wasn't just preparation, it was obsession. Ancient Chinese emperors typically buried a handful of symbolic figures, but Qin Shi Huang went further than any ruler before or since. Some scholars argue this reflects his belief in literal immortality, that he expected to wake in the afterlife and continue ruling, needing loyal troops to suppress restless spirits or rebellious nobles. Others see it as a cosmic insurance policy. The Qin dynasty had unified China through brutal conquest, leaving countless enemies in its wake. What if death wasn't an escape from vengeance? The army's arrangement deepens this narrative. The front ranks are filled with seasoned warriors, their expressions hardened as if expecting immediate battle. Behind them, younger recruits stand ready to replace the fallen, a chilling detail suggesting the emperor anticipated prolonged conflict. Even the chariots tell a story. Unlike ceremonial vehicles found in other tombs, these are built for speed and maneuverability. Their lightweight frames designed for chasing down threats rather than parade displays. But perhaps the most telling clue lies in what's missing. While other royal tombs included statues of servants and concubines to tend to the ruler's needs, Qin Shi Huang's necropolis prioritizes soldiers over all else. No terracotta musicians strumming lutes, no chefs preparing banquets, just row upon row of armed men. This wasn't a palace, it was a bunker. Modern psychologists might diagnose this as thanatophobia, an extreme fear of death manifesting in overpreparation. Ancient texts hint at the emperor's desperation, describing his frantic searches for elixirs of immortality and his reliance on mystics who promised to delay the inevitable. The Terra Cotta Army then becomes a physical manifestation of that anxiety. If he couldn't cheat death, he'd defy it by carrying his power beyond the grave. Yet there's another layer. By immortalizing his army in clay, Qin Shi Huang achieved a twisted form of control. Real soldiers could mutiny or desert, but terracotta ones would obey forever. In a dynasty where loyalty was fleeting, he created the perfect subordinate, silent, uncomplaining, and eternally vigilant. The irony: his greatest act of paranoia became his most enduring legacy. 2,000 years later, we're still deciphering the fears etched into those clay faces, each one a snapshot of an emperor who conquered an empire but couldn't conquer his own dread. Look closely at the terracotta warriors, and you'll spot something strange, subtle but unmistakable differences in craftsmanship. Some figures boast intricate armor plates with razor-sharp details, while others appear rougher, their facial features almost hurriedly carved. These aren't just artistic choices, they're clues to a mystery buried in the very clay itself. Evidence suggests the army's construction wasn't a continuous effort but a project riddled with interruptions, raising a tantalizing question. What forced the emperor's artisans to down their tools, and what chaos unfolded above ground while this underground army lay incomplete? The gaps reveal themselves in layers, literally. Archaeological stratigraphy shows distinct bands of soil separating groups of figures, indicating periods where pits were left open before work resumed. In some sections, warriors stand half-finished, their torsos smoothed to perfection while their legs remain rough blocks of clay. Even the kiln marks tell a story. Chemical analysis of the terracotta reveals fluctuations in firing temperatures, as if different teams took over at different times, each with their own techniques. This wasn't just a change in shifts, it points to systemic disruptions that rocked the entire necropolis project. Historians have three leading theories. The first revolves around rebellion. Qin Shi Huang's reign was a pressure cooker of dissent peasants conscripted for his mega projects, scholars resentful of his book burnings, nobles stripped of power. Ancient texts describe uprisings in the empire's final years, including attacks on imperial workshops. Could revolts have forced artisans to flee, leaving figures half-baked in their kilns? Then there's the resource angle. Building 8,000 soldiers required staggering quantities of clay, timber for kilns, and mineral pigments transported from across the empire. Drought records from the period show severe shortages in the Wai River Valley, the same region supplying the project's water for clay mixing. Without it, production would have stalled. Even more telling, the sudden appearance of ghost bricks, sections where warriors stand on hastily laid bricks of poorer quality, suggesting a scramble for materials when supplies ran low. But the most provocative theory involves the emperor's own shifting obsessions. In his final years, Qin became fixated on elixirs of immortality, diverting funds and labor to expeditions for mythical herbs. Court records mention entire workshops repurposed to craft potion vessels instead of warriors. Imagine the scene: artisans ordered one day to sculpt archers, the next to mold ceremonial cauldrons, leaving pits littered with partially completed soldiers. The truth may lie in the warriors themselves. Some unfinished figures have unusual features, a mix of early and late artistic styles, as if new hands took over mid-project. Others show recycled components, like heads from broken statues grafted onto fresh bodies. These aren't just signs of haste, they're evidence of an empire coming undone. The Terra Cotta Army wasn't just built, it was patched together, a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of control even as Qin's world crumbled around him. Every gap in construction, every uneven kiln firing whispers the same thing: this wasn't an immortal empire, it was a race against time. Just beyond the pits of the Terra Cotta Army, archaeologists stumbled upon a grim counterpart to the emperor's grandeur: mass graves filled not with warriors but with the workers who built them. These skeletons, jumbled together without ceremony, tell a story far removed from the polished narrative of imperial glory. Some lie in poses that suggest exhaustion, their bones bearing the marks of repetitive stress and spinal deformities from hauling heavy clay. Others show signs of violent trauma: skull fractures, severed limbs hinting at something far darker than mere labor accidents. This raises a chilling question: were these workers honored craftsmen who died in service, or were they silenced to protect the tomb's secrets? Historical records offer conflicting clues. Sima Qian wrote that after Qin Shi Huang's burial, craftsmen were sealed inside the tomb to prevent them from revealing its mechanisms. But the graves near the pits predate the emperor's death, suggesting a pattern of brutality spanning the entire construction period. Forensic analysis reveals layers of suffering. Some skeletons belong to young men with muscle attachments worn down by years of hauling stone, while others are older, their bones showing healed fractures from past punishments. A few even have iron shackles fused to their ankles, stark evidence of forced labor. Yet the most revealing detail lies in their DNA. Recent studies of the bones show genetic markers from across ancient China: southern rice farmers, northern nomadic herders, even coastal fishermen. This wasn't just a local workforce, it was a conscripted empire, mirrors the diversity of the Terra Cotta Army itself. Some laborers likely came willingly, skilled artisans promised prestige. But many were probably war captives or convicts, their deaths unrecorded because their lives were disposable. The emperor's eternal guard required an unimaginable human cost paid in silence. But here's where the story twists. Amid the mass graves, archaeologists found smaller, neater burials, some with simple offerings like pottery or bronze coins. These might belong to master craftsmen granted dignity in death. One skeleton, buried with a set of finely carved chisels, showed no signs of physical strain, only the delicate arthritis of a lifetime spent sculpting. Were some workers valued even as others were discarded? The answer may lie in the soil itself. Chemical analysis of the graves closest to the tomb shows elevated mercury levels, matching legends of toxic protections. Were these workers poisoned after completing sensitive tasks, or did they succumb to the very materials they handled? Mercury-laden pigments lead glazed kilns. The truth is likely a mix of malice and neglect, a system that treated human lives as expendable inputs. These graves force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Terra Cotta Army isn't just a marvel of ancient engineering, it's a monument to inequality. For every lifelike general standing in eternal vigilance, there's a skeleton in the dirt, a reminder that empires aren't built by emperors, but by the unnamed thousands who perish in their shadows. And perhaps that's the real secret the tomb was meant to bury. Among the ranks of the Terra Cotta Army stand 600 silent sentinels, often overshadowed by their human counterparts, the horses. These aren't mere afterthoughts tucked between warriors. They're masterpieces of ancient artistry, each one frozen mid-stride with flared nostrils and muscular flanks. But unlike the soldiers' individualized faces, the horses share a strikingly uniform design: sleek bodies, arched necks, and stylized manes carved in repeating patterns. This contrast raises a fascinating question. If the warriors represent real people, why were their steeds rendered with such symbolic precision? The answer may lie in the horse's sacred status in Qin dynasty culture. Historical records describe Qin Shi Huang's obsession with equine power, not just for warfare, but as divine conduits. Ancient Chinese cosmology viewed horses as creatures capable of traversing heaven and earth, their hooves carrying souls between realms. Some scholars point to the horses' upward tilted heads and lifted hooves, postures typically reserved for mythical steeds depicted in Han Dynasty art. Were these Terra Cotta horses meant to pull the emperor's chariot not just across battlefields but through celestial realms? Yet practical military symbolism can't be ignored. The horses appear in two distinct types: cavalry mounts with simple saddles and chariot teams paired in groups of 4. Their positioning mirrors real Qin dynasty tactics, where chariots served as mobile command centers while cavalry flanked enemy lines. But here's the catch: these horses lack harnesses or reins. Either the leather fittings disintegrated over time, or their absence was intentional, suggesting a symbolic rather than functional role. The most intriguing detail lies in their manes. Each horse sports an identical geometric haircut, a far cry from the warriors' varied hairstyles. This wasn't artistic laziness, it was likely ritual coding. Qin artisans reserved realism for human figures, but used stylization for animals to denote their otherworldly purpose. Similar patterns appear on bronze ritual vessels, where stylized creatures symbolized cosmic power. Perhaps the horses embody a dual role: earthly weapons for an emperor's eternal army, and celestial vehicles for his journey among the gods. Their silent, uniform beauty whispers a truth the individualized warriors cannot. In the afterlife, it wasn't just human loyalty Qin Shi Huang required. He needed the divine speed of creatures unbound by mortal limits. Beneath the towering mound that marks Qin Shi Huang's tomb, whispers of hidden chambers have tantalized archaeologists for decades. Ground-penetrating radar scans reveal a labyrinth of anomalies, vast hollow spaces, and dense metallic deposits extending far beyond the excavated pits. Some patterns align eerily with ancient descriptions of an underground palace, complete with mercury rivers and celestial ceilings. But the most provocative reading comes from a 2021 survey showing a chamber unlike any other. A rectangular void shielded by what appears to be a reinforced wall, its contents a mystery. Could this be the Emperor's final resting place, untouched for over 2 millennia? The radar data paints a staggering picture. beneath 30 meters of packed earth lies a structure roughly the size of a football field, its layout mirroring Qin's imperial palace. Thermal imaging detects temperature fluctuations consistent with flowing liquid, perhaps the legendary mercury rivers described by historian Sima Qian. But it's the smaller chambers that ignite speculation. One shows metallic clusters resembling bronze ritual vessels, another what might be terracotta or jade artifacts stacked in rows. Most haunting is a central room with an oblong density, its shape and placement suggesting a sarcophagus. Yet without physical excavation, these remain ghostly outlines, teasing answers just beyond reach. Why the hesitation? Beyond ethical debates, the risks are material. Core samples confirm dangerous mercury levels enough to poison unprotected intruders, while structural models warn of potential collapses if the tomb's delicate balance is disturbed. Even non-invasive methods have limits. Radar can't distinguish between a golden statue and a pile of corroded bronze. For now, the chambers exist as digital shadows, their secrets preserved by the very technology meant to reveal them. Yet the rumors persist. Local legends speak of a jade chamber where the emperor's body lies encased in a suit of threaded jade pieces, a practice reserved for the divine. Others whisper of intact libraries, bamboo scrolls containing lost philosophies, perhaps even the emperor's personal journals, the most chilling theory. That the tomb isn't empty at all. Sima Qian wrote of sacrificed concubines and craftsmen sealed alive inside. If true, these chambers may hold not just treasures, but silent witnesses to history's darkest hour. Until science finds a way to peer deeper without disturbing the dead, the underground palace remains archaeology's ultimate cliffhanger, a treasure map with no way in. Walk through the Terra Cotta Army's pits and you'll notice something: missing women. Among 8,000 soldiers, 600 horses, and countless officials, there's not a single confirmed female figure. This absence is especially striking when you consider Qin Shi Huang's legendary harem, said to include thousands of concubines. If the emperor sought to recreate his entire court for the afterlife, why exclude half the population? One explanation lies in the rigid gender roles of the Qin dynasty. Ancient Chinese warfare was strictly masculine. Women rarely appeared in military contexts except as symbolic figures like the legendary heroine Hua Mulan, whose story wouldn't be written for centuries. The Terra Cotta Army wasn't just art, it was a functional military formation reflecting the patriarchal structure of Qin society. Even high-ranking concubines, while influential in court intrigues, held no place on the battlefield. But burial customs complicate this theory. Noble women from earlier dynasties were often interred with pottery figurines representing attendants. Why wouldn't Qin Shi Huang's consorts merit similar treatment? Some archaeologists speculate that female statues might exist in unexcavated sections of the necropolis, perhaps in a separate pit mimicking the inner palace, where real concubines lived segregated from male officials. Ground-penetrating radar has identified unexplored chambers near the tomb mound, but until excavations proceed, this remains conjecture. A darker possibility emerges from historical records. Sima Qian wrote that many of the emperor's concubines were buried alive with him, their bodies deemed more authentic than clay substitutes. If true, the absence of female figures could reflect a grisly efficiency. Why sculpt concubines when real ones could accompany him? Forensic evidence supports this. Mass graves near the site contain young female skeletons with jewelry matching Qin-era noble styles. Yet there's an intriguing exception: the acrobat pit. Among the performers frozen in mid-handstand, some have softer facial features and slighter builds, leading a few researchers to suggest they might represent women. Ancient texts describe female entertainers at Qin courts, and their inclusion, albeit in roles tied to spectacle rather than power, could hint at a symbolic hierarchy. The silence of the pit speaks volumes. Whether by design, oversight, or brutality, the Terra Cotta Army's missing women force us to confront how history gets memorialized and who gets left out of the story. For an emperor who sought to conquer death itself, eternity appears to have been a boys' club. Every Terra Cotta warrior's hairstyle is a silent proclamation of rank, an ancient barcode of military hierarchy etched in clay. The most striking distinctions appear atop their heads. Some sport simple buns tied at the nape, while others boast elaborate topknots twisted into tight spirals secured with ornate pins. These aren't just artistic flourishes, they're a coded language. The higher the knot, the higher the rank. Generals wear theirs centered like a crown, mid-ranking officers position them slightly off-center, and common soldiers settle for practical low knots that wouldn't snag in battle. Even the direction of the hair part carries meaning. Right-side divisions denote cavalry, left-side infantry, a subtle system for quick identification in the chaos of war. Armor reinforces this visual hierarchy. High-ranking officers display overlapping plates with intricate scales, each tiny tile painstakingly carved to mimic real lacquered leather. Lower ranks wear simpler, larger plates, while unarmored infantry suggest they were expendable front-line troops, but the real revelation lies in the sashes. Only elite officers have finely detailed cords cinching their armor, some with tasseled ends, a precursor to modern military insignia. These details align with fragments of Qin legal codes prescribing uniform standards, hinting at a bureaucracy obsessed with order even in death. Yet one anomaly upends expectations. Among the sea of topknots, a handful of warriors shave their temples, a style historically linked to the Bashu people of Sichuan, conquered by Qin years earlier. Were these sculpted portraits of actual defectors absorbed into the army, or was their inclusion propaganda, proof the emperor's dominion stretched beyond the Han Chinese heartland? The hairstyles may also solve a logistical puzzle. Ancient texts describe Qin soldiers tying colored cloth around their topknots to denote units, a system lost when the fabrics rotted away. But close examination reveals grooves in the clay where ribbons once sat. By cross-referencing these with weapon markings, archaeologists have tentatively reconstructed squads and battalions, revealing a chain of command so precise it rivals modern militaries. Perhaps most telling is what's absent. No warrior wears a helmet despite Qin's mastery of bronze metallurgy. This wasn't an oversight, it was doctrine. Surviving military manuals praise the psychological advantage of bareheaded charges, believing unshielded faces intimidated enemies. The Terra Cotta Army, then, isn't just a collection of statues. It's a frozen organizational chart. Its clay ranks whispering secrets of an empire that waged war as meticulously as it ruled. The Terra Cotta Army's lifelike realism stands in stark contrast to earlier Chinese funerary art, so much so that some scholars have proposed a startling theory. What if European artisans influenced its creation? In 2006, genetic analysis of human remains near the tomb complex revealed traces of mitochondrial DNA linked to ancient European populations. Coupled with the army's unprecedented naturalism, individualized features, realistic proportions, and intricate details, this discovery ignited a fiery debate. Could Hellenistic sculptors from the Mediterranean have journeyed east along the Silk Road, bringing their artistic traditions to Qin Shi Huang's workshops? Proponents point to striking parallels. The Terra Cotta warrior's anatomical precision mirrors Greek statues from the same era, like the Rias bronzes, where veins bulge from marble hands and muscle groups ripple beneath taut skin. Even more compelling is the sudden shift in Chinese funerary art prior to the Qin dynasty. Tomb figures were small and stylized. Then, seemingly overnight, artisans produced 8,000 life-sized figures with portrait-like detail. To some historians, this suggests outside intervention. They argue that Greek artists displaced by Alexander the Great's conquests might have found employment in Qin's cosmopolitan court, where the emperor famously sought exotic talents. But critics counter with hard evidence of indigenous innovation. Qin's craftsmen had already mastered bronze casting on a monumental scale. The tomb's bronze chariots feature horses with articulated tendons and drivers whose fingernails are visible. The transition from metal to terracotta may simply reflect available materials, not foreign tutelage. Moreover, the warriors' facial structures align firmly with East Asian physiognomy, their features distinct from Greek ideals of beauty. The so-called European DNA could belong to Central Asian traders or even distant ancestors, given the centuries of migration along the Silk Road. The debate takes a provocative turn when examining artistic techniques. Greek sculptors typically worked from live models or mathematical ratios, while Qin artisans used modular assembly, standardized body parts combined like clay puzzle pieces. This assembly line approach feels uniquely pragmatic, a reflection of China's bureaucratic efficiency rather than Mediterranean aesthetics. Even the famed Mercury rivers find precedent in earlier Chinese alchemy, not Hellenistic science. Ultimately, the controversy reveals more about modern biases than ancient realities. The insistence on European influence echoes outdated notions that advanced art must have Western roots. Yet the Terra Cotta Army's greatest marvel isn't its realism, it's how that realism serves a distinctly Chinese vision of eternity. These weren't idealized gods or athletes, but rank-and-file soldiers, their imperfections immortalized as proudly as their strength. Whether inspired by distant foreigners or homegrown genius, one truth remains: this army couldn't have risen anywhere but from the heart of Qin. Stories of misfortune surrounding the Terra Cotta Army begin almost the moment it was rediscovered. Locals whisper about farmers who first struck the clay soldiers suffering years of financial ruin, their fields inexplicably failing no matter how hard they worked. Others recount archaeologists falling ill with mysterious ailments, chronic dizziness, skin lesions that wouldn't heal after handling artifacts from the pits. The most chilling accounts involve a string of accidents during early excavations: a scaffolding collapse that injured 6 workers, a photographer's camera malfunctioning only inside the tomb complex, even a researcher's sudden heart attack mere hours after examining a warrior's face. These incidents sparked rumors of a curse, a supernatural retribution for disturbing Qin Shi Huang's eternal rest, but let's separate fact from folklore. Documented tragedies do exist. In 1976, less than 2 years after the initial discovery, 3 members of the original excavation team died prematurely, one from a brain hemorrhage, another in a traffic accident, the third from what doctors called unknown causes. Statistically, this cluster could be coincidence, but it's easy to see why superstitions took root. Even the scientific community treads carefully. Modern dig teams wear protective suits not just for dust, but as psychological armor against the tomb's ominous reputation. The so-called curse may have roots in something far older than the Qin dynasty. Ancient Chinese burial customs often included protective magic, inscribed warnings or ritual barriers meant to deter grave robbers. Sima Qian's records describe crossbow traps in the tomb's passageways, but mercury poisoning offers a more plausible modern explanation. Soil tests reveal toxic levels of the liquid metal, which could explain chronic symptoms among those working in poorly ventilated pits. Headaches, tremors, memory loss, all documented effects of mercury exposure mirror many cursed accounts. Yet some incidents defy easy explanation. In 2007, a perfectly preserved warrior suddenly crumbled to dust overnight inside a sealed museum case despite stable humidity controls. Conservators still debate whether it was a chemical reaction or something stranger. Then there's the infamous weeping warrior, a figure photographed with what appeared to be moisture streaks down its cheeks during a rainy excavation season, sparking claims of supernatural sorrow. Scientists later attributed it to condensation patterns in porous clay, but the image remains haunting. Whether curse or coincidence, the pattern is undeniable. This tomb guards its secrets fiercely. Even today, veteran archaeologists recite a quiet ritual before entering the pits, a nod to tradition, or perhaps an acknowledgement that some forces, scientific or otherwise, still lie beyond our understanding. The Terra Cotta Army's greatest defense may not be its swords or numbers, but the stories woven around it, warnings etched not in clay but in human fear. The ultimate mystery of the Terra Cotta Army isn't about clay or weapons, it's about the man who commanded them. 2,000 years after his death, no one knows what became of Qin Shi Huang's body. Does his corpse lie perfectly preserved in the heart of that untouched tomb? Or did time and chemistry reduce the first emperor to dust? Ancient texts offer tantalizing clues. Sima Qian describes a bronze sarcophagus floating on rivers of mercury, surrounded by celestial treasures, but he also records that the tomb was looted and burned shortly after the emperor's death, leaving historians to wonder if anything remains at all. Modern science provides chilling context for these accounts. Mercury wasn't just a decorative choice, it was central to Qin Shi Huang's obsession with immortality. Alchemists of his era believed liquid mercury could confer eternal life, and the emperor consumed mercury-laced elixirs daily. This may explain his sudden death at just 49 years old. Hair analysis of later Chinese nobility revealed lethal levels of the toxin. If his body was indeed sealed in a mercury-filled chamber, the metal's antimicrobial properties could have slowed decomposition dramatically. Some scholars point to the remarkably preserved Mawangdui tomb from the later Han Dynasty, where a noblewoman's body survived with skin and organs intact thanks to an airtight burial and unknown embalming techniques. Could Qin Shi Huang's physicians have mastered even more advanced preservation methods? But the looting theory raises doubts. Xiang Yu's rebels weren't just vandals, they were systematic. Records describe them breaking into the tomb's outer chambers, seizing bronzeware, and setting fires that raged for months. If they reached the inner sanctum, the emperor's body would have been their prime target. Desecrating the ruler's remains was the ultimate act of political erasure, a way to break his dynasty's divine mandate. Forensic analysis of nearby pits supports this. Some warrior statues show scorch marks aligned with the direction of the fires. Then there's the jade suit hypothesis. High-ranking Han Dynasty nobles were buried in armor woven from thousands of jade plaques, believed to protect against decay. While no Qin-era examples survive, archaeologists found jade fragments in the tomb complex, leading some to speculate the emperor might have pioneered this practice. A fully intact jade-clad body would rewrite history, but it would also have been irresistible to looters. The metal threads holding such suits together often contained gold, making them valuable scrap. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the tomb does hold a body, just not the emperor's. Sima Qian wrote that after Qin Shi Huang's death, his ministers concealed the corpse for weeks while his carriage continued touring the empire, masking the smell with rotting fish. By the time burial occurred, decomposition may have been unavoidable. Some theorists suggest the inner chamber contains an effigy instead, a terracotta double to house his spirit while his real remains were secretly interred elsewhere. The truth may lie in the soil itself. Recent core samples from the mound show unusual enzyme activity, microbial signatures that sometimes accompany organic preservation. Until we dare to open that final door, the emperor's fate remains suspended between science and legend. Whether reduced to bones or resting untouched in Mercury's embrace, one thing is certain. Qin Shi Huang's greatest act of control was ensuring no one would ever see him vulnerable, not even in death. His clay army stands guard over more than a tomb. They protect the last unbroken secret of a man who refused to acknowledge mortality. Among the perfectly sculpted ranks of the Terra Cotta Army, scattered clues tell a story of abrupt interruption, figures half-formed, pits left gaping open, tools hastily discarded as if workers fled mid-task. This isn't the orderly conclusion of a decades-long project. It's the archaeological equivalent of a frozen moment, a construction site abandoned in crisis. Walk through Pit 2 and you'll spot warriors with only their upper bodies detailed, their legs rough blocks of unfired clay. In Pit 4, empty trenches stretch eerily, their planned occupants never materializing. Even the kilns tell a story. Some still hold partially fired statues, their clay cracked from sudden temperature drops when the fires died untended. The scale of incompleteness suggests more than bad planning. It hints at a system in freefall. Historical timelines paint a grim backdrop. Qin Shi Huang died unexpectedly in 210 BC during one of his obsessive tours of the empire. Court records describe a frantic cover-up. His ministers concealed the death for weeks, transporting the decomposing body while pretending he still lived, all to avoid panic. By the time the emperor was buried, rebellions were already erupting across China. The dynasty collapsed in just 4 years, its heir overthrown by rival factions. This chaos provides the most straightforward explanation for the army's unfinished state. The workers simply ran out of time, but there's another layer. Some incomplete figures show artistic shortcuts not seen in earlier sections, faces carved with fewer details, armor plates rendered as simple grooves rather than intricate scales. This suggests the project was accelerating toward a deadline even before the emperor's death. Could Qin Shi Huang, increasingly paranoid about assassination and obsessed with immortality, have demanded faster progress, pushing artisans to the breaking point? Ancient texts mention his final years as a whirlwind of frantic projects, expeditions for elixirs, the burning of scholarly texts, conscription of laborers for the Great Wall. The Terra Cotta Army might have been another casualty of this manic urgency. The most haunting evidence comes from the workers' quarters near the site. Excavations revealed half-eaten meals left on tables, tools dropped mid-use, even roughed-out clay molds abandoned with fingerprints still visible in the wet material. This isn't the orderly departure of a completed workforce, it's the snapshot of a sudden evacuation. Whether fleeing rebellion, political purge, or the collapse of central authority, these artisans left behind more than unfinished statues. They left a silent testament to the fragility of imperial power. Yet the incompleteness raises a provocative question. Was the army ever meant to be finished? Qin cosmology viewed death as a mirror of life, with imperfection being part of existence. Some scholars argue the rough patches were intentional, symbolizing the eternal process of creation and the emperor's unending campaign to shape his afterlife. Or perhaps, in a final irony, the unfinished state serves as the perfect metaphor for Qin Shi Huang's reign, a colossal ambition that crumbled under its own weight, leaving behind fragments of what might have been. The Terra Cotta Army's greatest truth may lie not in its perfection, but in its glaring absence of it. Step into Pit 1 of the Terra Cotta Army, and you'll notice something unsettling: the way sound behaves. Whisper a word near the entrance, and the echo carries with eerie clarity to the far end, nearly 200 feet away. This isn't just an architectural quirk. The entire underground complex seems engineered to manipulate sound in ways that defy the natural acoustics of an open burial chamber. Archaeologists measuring decibel levels found that certain frequencies amplify disproportionately, particularly the low hum of chanting or the metallic ring of a sword being drawn. The effect is so pronounced it begs the question: was this acoustic anomaly an accident of construction, or a deliberate feature meant to unsettle intruders or awaken something else? The design choices suggest intentionality. The pit's walls aren't smooth, they're ribbed with subtle undulations that scatter sound waves in precise patterns, much like the interior of ancient Greek amphitheaters. Even the arrangement of the warriors plays a role. Their staggered rows and varied heights create a sound maze, breaking up echoes just enough to make whispers seem to come from multiple directions at once. Some researchers point to Qin dynasty rituals described in later texts, where priests used specific tones to commune with ancestors. Could the pits have functioned as a colossal resonance chamber designed to amplify ceremonial chants or drumbeats during burial rites? Then there's the mercury factor. The same toxic element suspected to flow through the tomb's model rivers has unusual acoustic properties. Liquid mercury reflects sound waves nearly perfectly. If vessels of mercury were placed strategically in niches along the pits, as traces in the soil hint they might have been, they could have acted as primitive amplifiers, bouncing voices or instrument tones across the chamber with supernatural clarity. Imagine the psychological impact: robbers creeping through the darkness, only to hear their own footsteps multiplied into the cadence of an approaching army. But the most compelling evidence comes from the warriors themselves. X-rays reveal that many hollow torsos contain small clay pellets, a detail once dismissed as kiln debris. Yet when replicas were tested, these pellets acted like primitive sound dampeners, absorbing certain frequencies while allowing others to ring out. The effect is uncanny. Strike a drum near such a figure, and the pitch bends unnaturally, as if the statue itself is distorting the noise. Was this an early form of acoustic filtering, meant to isolate ritual harmonics from ambient sound? Not everyone agrees. Skeptics argue the acoustics are a happy accident, the result of compacted earth and the pit's rectangular shape. But that doesn't explain why later Han Dynasty tombs, built with similar layouts, lack this phenomenon. The Terra Cotta Army's sonic oddities remain one of its least discussed mysteries, perhaps because sound leaves no fossils. Yet standing in those shadowed corridors, surrounded by silent clay soldiers, you can't shake the feeling that the air itself is waiting to carry some long-lost whisper, a message from the Emperor's architects, or maybe even the warriors themselves. Just a few miles from the ancient burial pits, an unexpected sight appears: rows of modern workshops where artisans knead clay and carve faces with a precision that would make their Qin dynasty ancestors proud. These aren't archaeological labs, they're replica factories churning out imitation terracotta warriors for tourists and museums worldwide. At first glance, it might seem like mere commerce, but look closer and you'll discover something remarkable. These workshops have become accidental time machines, preserving techniques that might otherwise have vanished forever. The process is eerily similar to the ancient methods. Artisans start with local clay mixed to match the original composition, then sculpt bodies in segments: legs, torsos, arms, before assembling them like puzzle pieces. Firing happens in brick kilns nearly identical to those unearthed near the tomb complex, albeit with temperature controls replacing guesswork. But here's where it gets fascinating. Some workshops employ living masters, craftsmen who have spent decades reverse engineering the warrior's secrets. One artisan, Zhang, demonstrates how the Qin-era clay ribbons those coiled layers visible in broken statues aren't just aesthetic, they prevent cracking during firing. "We tried modern slabs first," he explains, "but they shattered every time. The old way works better." These replicas aren't just souvenirs, they're research tools. When the Chinese government banned exporting original warrior fragments, museums turned to high-quality imprints for study. In 2019, a German team used replica pigments to test preservation theories, discovering that a mix of egg white and lacquer, long dismissed as too fragile, actually bonded best to terracotta. Meanwhile, historians noticed something peculiar. Modern workshops struggle most with replicating the warrior's hollow torsos. Ancient artisans left strategic cavities to balance weight and prevent kiln explosions, a technique so counterintuitive that today's craftsmen only mastered it after years of trial and error. Yet the factories also pose ethical dilemmas. Some replicas are so precise they've flooded black markets, duping collectors and muddying provenance records. In 2016, a London auction house withdrew a 2,000-year-old warrior after scans revealed modern kiln marks. Archaeologists worry these copies could someday overshadow the originals, reducing one of history's greatest artistic achievements to a commodity. But perhaps the most surprising revelation came from a workshop accident. When a batch of replicas cracked under rapid drying, artisans experimented with straw tempering, an ancient method absent from Qin records. To their shock, the straw-clay mixture matched previously unexplained fibers found in original warriors. It was a breakthrough. The Qin likely used organic stabilizers, but the evidence decayed over millennia. Now, this rediscovered technique is revolutionizing conservation methods for the actual army. The replica factories hold up a mirror to the past, proving that sometimes the best way to uncover ancient secrets isn't just digging deeper, it's building anew. Every imperfect imitation, every stubborn crack in a modern kiln, whispers clues about how the first emperor's artisans turned Earth into eternity. After Qin Shi Huang's death, something extraordinary happened, or rather, didn't happen. No other Chinese emperor ever attempted to replicate the Terra Cotta Army's staggering scale. Not the Han dynasty that followed, nor the Tang, nor even the Ming with their lavish tombs. This abrupt shift raises a provocative question. Why did an empire obsessed with ritual and ancestry abandon such a monumental tradition? The answer lies at the crossroads of politics, economics, and a deliberate rewriting of history. Take the Han dynasty, Qin's immediate successor. Their rulers adopted a radically different approach: smaller, symbolic clay figurines, often no taller than a forearm's length. Tomb excavations reveal armies of miniature soldiers, arranged not in battle formations but as processional escorts. Where Qin's warriors were individualized, Han figures were mass-produced from molds, their faces near identical. This wasn't just a cost-cutting measure, it reflected a philosophical rejection of Qin excess. Han emperors positioned themselves as humble stewards, distancing their reigns from the first emperor's notorious extravagance. Archaeologists even find Han burial texts explicitly criticizing Qin's waste of human and material resources on tomb projects, a stunning rebuke carved into history. Yet the real shift may have been practical. Building 8,000 life-sized statues required an unfathomable workforce. Historians estimate up to 700,000 laborers over decades. Subsequent dynasties, wary of sparking peasant revolts, opted for symbolic substitutes. The Tang dynasty's pottery figurines, though exquisitely detailed, rarely exceeded 3 feet tall. Ming emperors favored spirit roads lined with stone animals and officials, visible above ground as displays of power rather than hidden armies. Each choice reveals a calculation: how to project authority without inviting rebellion. There's also the spiritual evolution. Later dynasties embraced Confucian ideals that prioritized ancestral veneration over material provisioning for the afterlife. A Tang dynasty scroll from the 8th century captures this perfectly. It depicts the soul as a wispy figure ascending to heaven, while burial goods remained earthly shadows. Why sculpt an eternal army when the spirit needed no such protection? Even the grandest later tombs, like those of the king emperors, focused on celestial imagery, constellations painted on vaulted ceilings, not battalions underfoot. But perhaps the most compelling clue comes from what was destroyed. When rebel leader Xiang Yu sacked the Qin tomb complex, he didn't just loot, he made a spectacle of its desecration, leaving shattered warriors as warnings against imperial hubris. Later rulers took the lesson to heart. The Terra Cotta Army's fate became a cautionary tale. No amount of clay could shield an emperor from the consequences of tyranny. In the end, Qin Shi Huang's greatest legacy might not be his army's grandeur, but the collective decision never to repeat it. Scattered throughout the Terra Cotta Army's pits, patches of blackened earth and warriors with charred limbs tell a story of fire, but not the kind you'd expect. Some statues bear scorch marks concentrated on their left sides, as if flames licked at them from a specific direction. Others stand amid layers of ash and melted bronze, their once vibrant pigments reduced to ghostly streaks. This wasn't random decay, it was deliberate destruction. The question is, by whom? Historical records point fingers at Xiang Yu, the rebel leader who toppled the Qin dynasty. Sima Qian describes his troops ransacking the tomb complex around 206 BC, looting weapons and setting fires that burned for months. Excavations support this. Charred timber beams in Pit 1 align with wind patterns from the northwest, matching seasonal gusts that would have fanned flames from surface structures downward. But here's the catch: not all burn patterns fit this narrative. In Pit 3, officers show scorching primarily on their backs, suggesting fires ignited inside the pit itself rather than spreading from above. Then there's the mercury anomaly. Soil tests reveal spikes of vaporized mercury in burned sections, a detail that complicates the arson theory. Mercury burns blue and relatively cool, unlikely to leave the deep charring found on some statues. Unless the rebels accidentally ignited pre-existing mercury reservoirs, something ancient texts never mention the fires might have had another source. This leads to a spine-tingling alternative: ritual burning. Qin funerary rites often involved spirit goods, objects ceremonially damaged to release their essence for the afterlife. Could the flames have been part of a closing ritual meant to activate the army before sealing the tomb? Archaeologists note that the most severely burned warriors clustered near ceremonial bronzeware, their weapons ritually bent, a practice seen in other Qin burials. Yet another twist emerges from the kiln debris. Some damaged statues contain partially refired clay, as if someone tried to repair them post-burning. Was this haphazard restoration the work of loyalists trying to salvage the emperor's legacy amid collapse, or proof that the fires happened in phases, first during rebellion, then later as Han Dynasty officials purged Qin symbols? The burn marks resist easy answers. They could be scars of political vengeance, sacred pyres, or even the fallout from Qin Shi Huang's own precautions. Ancient texts mention self-destruct mechanisms to deter tomb raiders. But one detail unites all theories: fire wasn't an accident here. It was a weapon, a ritual, or a final command transforming clay soldiers into witnesses of an empire's violent rebirth. The untouched heart of Qin Shi Huang's tomb complex remains one of archaeology's greatest locked doors, not because we lack curiosity, but because the very tools that could unveil its secrets might also destroy them. Modern scientists stand at a crossroads, armed with cutting-edge technology like muon imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and even AI-assisted analysis, yet paralyzed by ethical and practical dilemmas. Take muon tomography, which uses cosmic rays to map dense underground structures, a technique that revealed hidden chambers in Egypt's pyramids. When applied to the emperor's mound, it detected vast voids consistent with ancient descriptions of an underground palace. But here's the catch: muons struggle to distinguish between a bronze statue and a pile of corroded metal fragments, leaving us guessing whether those shimmering anomalies are treasure or rubble. Ground-penetrating radar offers another glimpse, uncovering intricate tunnel networks beneath the burial mound. One scan in 2019 identified what appears to be a staircase descending 30 meters, a tantalizing hint of accessibility. Yet radar signals bounce harmlessly off mercury pools, creating blind spots where the most perilous traps might lurk. Even drones equipped with thermal cameras hit walls, literally. The tomb's layered earth and compacted clay deflect heat signatures, rendering its innermost chambers invisible to infrared eyes. The debate splits experts. Purists argue that some sites deserve their mysteries, comparing invasive archaeology to cracking open a fragile egg for the sake of curiosity. They point to King Tut's tomb, where rushed excavations in the 1920s caused irreparable damage to textiles and painted surfaces. On the other side are innovators developing nanobot scouts, microscopic robots designed to slip through crevices without disturbing the structure. Early prototypes can analyze air chemistry and even capture microscopic images, but navigating 2,000-year-old debris without getting stuck remains a hurdle. Then there's the mercury problem. Soil tests show concentrations 80 times higher than natural levels, with vapor pockets that could poison excavators within hours. Some propose freezing the mercury with liquid nitrogen before extraction, a risky maneuver that might destabilize the tomb's delicate equilibrium. Others suggest waiting for AI to advance enough to virtually reconstruct the chamber using data alone, a digital resurrection that could take decades. Perhaps the most poignant argument against haste comes from the warriors themselves. When Pit 2 was first excavated in the 1990s, pigments on newly exposed statues flaked away before conservators could intervene. Today, those losses haunt every decision. As one researcher put it, we get one shot at this. If we're wrong, 2 millennia of history turn to dust in our hands. The Emperor's Tomb isn't just a technical challenge, it's a test of patience, a reminder that some doors open only when time decides they should. Until then, the silent army stands guard, whispering that curiosity must sometimes yield to reverence. From the missing weapons gripped by empty clay hands to the uncharted chambers humming with toxic mercury, the 25 mysteries surrounding the Terra Cotta Army don't just puzzle archaeologists, they redefine what we thought we knew about power, fear, and the lengths one man would go to conquer death itself. Each unanswered question peels back another layer of Qin Shi Huang's legacy, revealing not just a ruler but a paradox. A visionary who unified China's warring states yet trembled at the idea of eternity alone. A tyrant who burned books but built an army so lifelike, it feels like a library of flesh and clay. Think about it, why would history's most meticulous record keeper leave no trace of the army's creation? Were the warriors individualized faces, portraits of real soldiers, or a cosmic roll call of souls he expected to command in the afterlife? And what awaits in that untouched tomb, bursting with treasures, booby-trapped with poison, or hollowed out by rebels centuries ago? The deeper you dig into these mysteries, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just an archaeological site, it's a mirror. The Terra Cotta Army reflects our own obsessions, the hunger for immortality, the terror of oblivion, the ache to leave something behind that can't be erased. Maybe that's why, even after 50 years of study, the warriors refuse to surrender all their secrets. Some truths might be too fragile to unearth, like the original pigments that flake away at a breath, or the whispers of the workers whose bones lie in unmarked pits. Other enigmas, like the tomb's rumored rivers of mercury, taunt us with the limits of modern science. We can map the stars, yet we dare not crack open a single chamber for fear of losing what little remains. So here's the real question lingering in the clay-dusted silence. Does solving these mysteries honor Qin Shi Huang's legacy or destroy it? Every warrior's chipped elbow, every scorched patch of earth, every hollow where a weapon once lay, they're not just clues. Their choices, the choice to bury an empire in miniature, to silence thousands for secrecy, to trade humanity for eternity, and now the choice is ours. Do we keep digging, knowing each answer might cost us another piece of history? Or do we let some riddles endure, reminding us that the past isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation that never ends? The comment section is your excavation pit. Drop your wildest theories below. Were the warriors cursed? Is the tomb a decoy? Could there be another army waiting undiscovered? The beauty of these mysteries is that they're alive, evolving with every new generation of dreamers and scientists. Who knows, maybe the person who finally cracks Qin Shi Huang's greatest secret is watching this right now. Until then, the soldiers stand watch, their unblinking eyes fixed on a future they were built to outlast.